Okay, everybody have a seat. Welcome, my name is Betsy Hatfield, and I'm the Executive Director of Preservation Kentucky, and we are delighted to have y'all here today. We appreciate your taking some time out of your afternoon to join us for our launch of a very special program, Tour 120. And at this time, I'd like to ask our board chairman, Grady Walter, up to the podium.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Betsy, for the introduction. Betsy is tireless in her advocacy and work for Preservation Kentucky. None of this would be happening without her. Want to recognize a few of you in the audience, and if I'm overlooking anyone, please forgive me, but we've got Kristen Branscombe, Commissioner of the Kentucky Department of Tourism. She'll be speaking. Kelly Deering Smith from the Louisville Water Company. We've got some wonderful people with the water company who have helped us immeasurably throughout this whole process, and not least by their corporate sponsorship. We have Vince Gunther with Water Company, Spencer Bruce, President and CEO. Hope I'm getting the title right on that. JRA Architects, who are also a corporate sponsorship, and you all get the award for best attendance, and we really appreciate that today. We have Ted Stone, who is on our Preservation Kentucky board, Jamie Payton with Boyle County, and I may not get your organization exactly right, but I'm going by counties today. So with Boyle County, Lynn Hollingsworth with Bourbon County, Heath Seymour with Vital Sites, and I'm leaving Charles Cash with Vital Sites as well. So if I've left you out, you can take me to task after the program. Again, thank you for being here today. This beautiful building certainly reminds us of the spa towns of Europe, and particularly along the Rhone Valley. It's just incredible to be here today on such a beautiful day. And thank you, presenting sponsors, Louisville Water Company and JRA Architects. Before we got started, we might want to think about how we say Tour 120. I've heard, as I've traveled across the country, I've heard Tua, Tour, and Tour, and I'm just going to say Tour 120 and hope that you don't get tired of my pronunciation and my use of that word through the program. Preservation Kentucky is a statewide membership-based 501c3 public charity nonprofit that advocates the sustainability of our historic buildings, rural landscapes, and prehistoric sites. Our mission is to make Kentucky communities stronger, healthier, and economically sustainable by preserving and protecting our heritage. But when someone asks me, what is Preservation Kentucky and what does it do, I have a really difficult time finding a concise answer for that. Sometimes it's easier to show people what we do, and that's one of the things that we think Tour 120 will do, show people why historic preservation is important. I'm not a professional architectural historian or a preservationist. I'm just someone who is passionate about old buildings. I owe this passion in part to growing up in a stuccoed story-and-a-half craftsman-style house built sometime before 1920 that I watched my parents tirelessly rehab in 1972. They didn't think of themselves as preservationists. They were just fixing up an old house for their growing family to have a safe, secure, and affordable home. My father joked that it was his urban renewal project, and he joked about that very often. But it was truly a Norman Rockwell scene from my childhood. In the late 1970s, the newspaper ran articles about houses in our town that had been added recently to the National Register of Historic Places, but not our own, by the way. Reading these articles left me with a curiosity and a pride of place that later in life sparked a greater interest in architecture and preservation. I still have those articles clipped in a scrapbook. What we see in our communities at an early age influences and hopefully moves us toward a lifelong appreciation of our built environment. What we preserve strengthens our communities and makes them more appealing to us and to visitors and tourists. We hope that Tour 120 will influence many people throughout the state and beyond. Where would New Orleans be without the French Quarter or the Garden District, or San Francisco without its painted ladies? Kentucky's architectural heritage is just as rich as other better-known places. The difference is that ours is more difficult to promote because it's spread across the Commonwealth. Some years ago, I took a horse-drawn tour of Beaufort, South Carolina. Our guide, a young college student working in the tourism industry during summer break, informed us that a particular house was a fine example of Georgian architecture, she said, and I quote, "the way they build houses over in Georgia." True story. But joking aside, many of you know that Beaufort has been the setting of inspirational novels by lifelong resident Pat Conroy, popular filming location for major motion pictures including The Big Chill, Prince of Tides, Forrest Gump, and G.I. Jane. So the connection between historic preservation, tourism, and economic development really is something to talk about. But as importantly, programs like ours can educate people about architectural styles and the ways that people lived throughout our history. Kentucky has both famous and not so well-known buildings in the Federal, Greek Revival, Gothic Revival, and Georgian styles, as well as Prairie, Craftsman, and Art Deco styles, among others. In the right context and promoted properly, tours can be a veritable classroom. Imagine kids and adults getting excited about our built environment. A little bit off script, if you were here earlier today, you would have been really impressed by the number of people who were out coming through this building, oohing and awing like I did the first time I saw it and still am doing, and just enjoying being here and learning about this place. And the questions that I overheard were quite impressive. And of course, Louisville Water Company's people are very well versed in their buildings and what they have, and I'm amazed at what a great tour for free this was, and is going to be later in May again. In Kentucky, we need more awareness and sensitivity to what we have that is truly valuable and authentic. We also need more incentives for people to preserve and restore those places. Despite Preservation Kentucky's very tight budget, our goals are to advocate, promote, reinforce, and connect people with their built environment. And I've shortened that a little bit for everyone's benefit, Betsy. So it's not very concise, but it is what we do. We share a common problem with other organizations like ours. How do we strike a balance between fundraising to carry out our mission and actually carrying out that mission? This question is what really led us to Tour120, which we hope will enable us all to do simultaneously both. We're convinced that people will be excited about historic preservation when they are properly and regularly exposed to the fruits of that labor. We need to get these houses open, these buildings open, so that people see them and come out on a sunny day and learn something and are excited like we are. We first envisioned a very simple concept: recruit host committees to offer building tours on the same day or weekend of the year in as many of the Commonwealth's 120 counties as we're willing to participate, hence the name. We knew that signing all 120 counties would be ambitious, but hey, we aimed high. I'm pleased to report that we have 19 counties represented, showcasing more than 57 buildings, sites, or walking tours across the state. We especially love those overachieving communities like Jefferson, who brought us 3, some had 4, and one county even had 7 because they were able to pair a neighborhood tour with our scheme for Tour120. So very impressive. Happily, we listened to the people serving on host committees throughout the state, and in so doing, Tour120 has taken a more sustainable shape. Thanks to the generous support of presenting sponsors Louisville Water Company and JRA Architects, we feel confident that Tour120 will be much more than a collection of annual tours. Instead, Tour120.org will serve as the year-round online portal for our member host committees and their designated sites or tour events. It will provide members with a way to market, a way to generate attention across the state to historic places in their own communities. Through promotion of special tours, they'll be able to use social and traditional media through what we're constructing. They will have a permanent listing on our site and photos and historical background that is in some cases much easier to use as a research document than some of the other sources that you might be aware of. We found that many sites don't even have a dedicated standalone website. Facebook is de facto the extent of their web presence. And while Facebook can be an effective tool, they need more. Each member site will have its own page on Tour120.org, and they'll do this without having to construct their own web page. If they want to buy a domain, they can point it to something on Tour120, but we're trying to provide a very easy-to-use platform, and that is the backbone of what we intend to build upon. We will be promoting Tour120 through Google and other advertising media, and we are acting cooperatively. For instance, attracting people who have an affinity for significant buildings to the tour120.org site to read information on Kentucky's only residence designed by Frank Lloyd Wright may encourage them to visit Frankfurt and to tour Liberty Hall or the Orlando Brown House. Tour120 will encourage membership by both properties that are open to the public and those that are strictly private. All material will carefully designate those that are private for security reasons. And for old house geeks like me, sometimes a simple drive-by of a private house is quite enough. In the coming weeks and months, we will be adding functionality to the website to make it searchable by keyword, location, age, architectural style, architect or builder, and persons of historical significance, etc. And while data like this does exist for some properties in various places, such as the Department of the Interior's database, and in some cases on the property's own websites, it isn't necessarily accessible or friendly to someone planning a trip or just wanting to learn more. In time, we anticipate that Tour120 name and logo will become a valuable endorsement that tells visitors that this is a great place to visit, much like the Good Housekeeping seal of old. Attractions throughout the state advertise and take advantage of the state's co-op programs, such as the Tourism Marketing Incentive Program. But for many historic sites, the money for admission tickets does not cover even the basic operating expenses, let alone advertising costs. In time, and in the cooperative spirit that has launched Tour120, we hope to have a cooperative fund of our own to help member sites advertise and market themselves. Tour120 is still evolving, but the concept and the vision are strong. Remember that part of awareness means that these tours will expose a generation of Kentuckians to the beauty of old buildings, just as those experiences in the 1970s had a profound influence on me. For us today, our first step is to make sure that the tours scheduled for Saturday and Sunday, May 18th and 19th, are indeed successful. Please help us make it so and help us sustain the 120 vision. Thank you very much, and I would now like to introduce Kristen Baranscombe. Thank you.
Whew, thank you, Grady. We're in that little crosswind here. It's kind of nice, though, with all this weather. Thank you all so much for having me here today. Happy National Travel and Tourism Week. I think that is also a great start for Preservation Month. So the two are certainly aligned, and I think Tour120 shows that alignment and how preservation and tourism it can work hand in hand, and you can't do one without the other. Big thank you to Preservation Kentucky, to Betsy and Grady. Thank you for everything that you all do. Thank you to Louisville Water Company for hosting us here. This is one of my favorite I shouldn't have favorites, right? But one of my favorite buildings. And we are so excited about Tour120. So the Department of Tourism, we are the state's most public-facing agency, and we get to market the state. And how lucky are we to do that, and all the rich opportunities that we have. And so for a marketer, I am thrilled about this program because this is more stuff for us to sell and other ways for us to tell people about Kentucky and how to get them to our great state and experience it through preservation. Tourism is big business in this state. We're awaiting our 2018 numbers, but it's over $9.7 billion in economic impact, and that's from U.S. travel. It's 2 years old. Over 100,000 jobs supported through tourism in this state, and the third largest revenue generating industry in the state. So tourism is so vitally important, not only to the diversification of our tax base, but also how we are perceived, how Kentucky is perceived around the world. And when people come to Kentucky and have a wonderful experience, that perception changes, or we can write how we're viewed through that experience. And one thing that I love probably the most about tourism is that, when we have folks come in that aren't from Kentucky and they get to experience our state, they have this great time, they spend their money here, but all of the infrastructure and programs like Tour120, not only can tourists participate and have a great time with it, but our citizens can as well. And so I believe that Tour120 and tourism in this state just enhances the quality of life for every Kentuckian. And I think that is so important for a variety of reasons. I think that tourism, Kentucky is in a fantastic spot right now. We are the front porch of the South, the gateway to the Midwest. People are looking for authenticity. And with being within a day's drive of 75% of the U.S. population, with more airlift that we continually get in our airports, we are a fantastic destination. And I say, and unashamedly say, that Kentucky is the great American state. Because if somebody says to you, they've never been to the United States, but they have only one state to go to really get a sense of America and Americana and authenticity. And they say, where should I go? And I say, you come to Kentucky. You come to Kentucky because even if you go west to east and you think about all that we have and the diversity of our people, our regions, our topography, our preservation offerings, you can do it all and see it all here and get a true sense of place in Kentucky. So I think that authenticity, you can't get more authentic than these buildings and these homes that we're preserving and that you can see through Tour120. This year, the department and our tourism industry, we're focused on storytellers. We're saying it's the year of storytellers. Again, somewhat to position ourselves and for people to have that authentic voice. And when you think of storytellers, obviously you're thinking of people, right? Locals that are telling the story of what you can do, see, and experience in the state. But I believe that storytellers can also be buildings. I think just sitting, really, I made the note just sitting here, looking at all of these wonderful buildings and homes that are coming across the screen. Think about all the stories that we can tell and all of the history and all of the Kentuckiness that are within those buildings and how rich of an experience that visitors can have by seeing these homes. So I'm really, really thrilled about this, about Tour120 and where it can go. I also think, I will be the first to admit, I may have taken a photo outside this building so I can share on my Instagram. And we all know that social media and sharing is such a huge driver of travel now. And I think everybody could say they would love to take their selfie in front of all of these buildings and share it on social media. And if they don't, Betsy, I think that should be a requirement of entrance, correct? Don't you think? That should be part of the tour, anybody that goes. I just also want to say thank you to all of the great partners in Tour120. We cannot do this alone. The Department of Tourism, the Tourism Arts and Heritage Cabinet, we can't do it alone. We can't do it alone, just our local tourism offices. We can't just do it us two together. We can't just do it with just the attraction or just the home or just Tour120. We all have to work together to increase that Kentucky bandwidth and to tell that Kentucky story. And so in the theme and general vein of talking about buildings, I think that this year is a fantastic foundation that Preservation Kentucky has put for Tour120. And I cannot wait to see what the years to come have in store for this program and what beautiful building and creation we're going to all build together. So thank you all so much, and we look forward to seeing Tour120 grow this year and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. I would like to welcome Kelly Deering-Smith to her own podium today. And I want to tell you something. We've been planning this program for a long time. It's been in stops and starts. But where we really felt a catalyst for it was when Kelly and Betsy were talking, and she got it immediately and said, this so aligns with what we're about, and we want to be part of this. And I said, wow, this is wonderful. And how did I know that it would be so much more than just the support, but two of the most amazing buildings to be part of our tour? So, thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for coming to our house. You've heard that it's preservation, it's tourism month and week, and by the way, it's National Drinking Water Week. No lie. So it is perfect that you're in our house today. This is a perfect fit for Louisville Water Company. And I know some people might say, why in the world is a water utility part of this effort called Tour120? Well, that's because for more than 159 years, Louisville Water has always been more than just a water utility. When we started at the water tower at Zorn and River Road with that original pumping station in 1860, we were begging people to drink water. They drank bourbon. They didn't want water at that point, and it was free in their well. So our founders actually wrote that if our buildings look nice, people might like us. And they wrote that they were building water structures that would be the most elegant in the United States. And they still are, 100 and almost 60 years later. Where you're sitting today is the Crescent Hill Reservoir and Gatehouse. It opened in 1879, and when it opened, our founders wrote again that this would be the place that you would come to escape the city, get rid of the city life, come to the country, and come here and take your honeymoon photograph, which people actually did. So today, 170, almost 130 years later, the building looks almost identical to what it did in 1879. So we believe at Louisville Water Company, we make the best quality drinking water in the United States, and we hang our hat on that. We also believe that we have some of the most beautiful structures in the United States to match the quality of our drinking water. So those two go hand in hand. Grady mentioned the school children that were here earlier. We open our facilities. We are part of the community. Thousands of people come into this facility every year, as do the Waterworks Museum. So Tour120 fits perfectly with a drinking water utility that has never really acted like a drinking water utility. We have always been more than that. So I welcome you here today. Make sure you raise a glass of tap water to toast Drinking Water Week. And again, congrats to this effort. We are thrilled to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kelly. That was wonderful. I would also now like to introduce Tim Gravis, welcome you to the podium to talk about the building. And I would venture to guess that you know as much about this building as anyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Grady. JRA Architects is a proud corporate sponsor of this event. In recognition of Historic Preservation Month, we're here to celebrate not only the dedication and commitment of the building owners, but those craftsmen and tradespeople who have dedicated their lives to preserving buildings and structures just like this. Whether we're talking about a small cabin in a field, large municipal building, all of these structures help shape the history of our communities. These buildings have stories to tell, and we're here to help keep telling that story for generations to come. A prime example is the building that we're in here right now is the water company gatehouse. Back in 2010, the water company, Spencer, Kelly, you entrusted myself and our firm to keep this building alive for generations. Anyone who has ever worked or done a preservation project understands the challenges that goes into this, and let me tell you, there have been quite a few. But to give you an example of a couple of things that we ran into, since this building has not had a major renovation since probably in the early 1900s, to be honest with you, with the exception of the repairs that were done in 1974 after the tornado hit and actually tore down part of the grand stairs. This is really the first major effort to really come in, stabilize, and bring the building back to its original structure. One interesting fact is that when we came in here and toured it for the first time, we literally found the two stone slabs that are embedded in the walls, both on the left-hand and right side, which were the contracts with both the owners and the painters and the masons, literally written in stone. So they were basically on the hook for this building forever. A few other interesting items, just to tell you a little bit of the story of the building. When you walk in and you see the cathedral-style main space, you look up and you see the clay tile structure that's exposed for the roof. Through research, we found that this is the only roof clay tile structure in the Midwest, with the exception of locations in New York and Chicago. We had a lot of repairs and tiles that we had to figure out how to rebuild because they don't make these systems anymore. We did a lot of investigation on trying to find the original paint so the paint could be matched correctly. We also had a huge task of stabilizing the stone, both inside and outside the building. When you really recognize that the building is over 500 or 55 million gallon wells of water, the systems that we had to use had to be ergonomically correct, eco-friendly, because whatever we used was going to go, potentially get into the water. We needed to make sure that that was done. But the process to stabilize the stone, there were sections within the building that the face of the stone was literally crumbling off. So it was process after process and dedication, not only to the design team, but the craftsmen that we worked with to help actually do the work. Something we're very, very proud of to be partners with. So in the end, thank you all very much for creating this as a host event. And I enjoy seeing people here on the 18th, inviting you to come out and let us help tell the story of this building and the other sites all around Kentucky as part of Tour 120. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. With that, I would like to invite questions from the audience, if there are any, and about the program, about the building that Tim or Kelly will need to answer instead of me. But if you have any questions or comments, please, I welcome them. Okay. Well, then with that, I would invite you to enjoy some refreshments toward the back of the building on the tables, and some very good Louisville water. I don't think we have any bourbon today, but we have Louisville water. So thank you all for coming, and thank you for your support of Tour 120. Again, thank you, Louisville Water Company and JRA Architects.